Dennis Pekel quit GumGum to sit at home and think. No company, no product, no number. Just the sharpest read on the AI bubble I've heard all year, and a phrase you're going to steal. The alienation tax. The cost of selling to people whose worldview you never checked. He can't tell you what it costs. On this episode of the ADOTAT Show, we spend a half hour finding out anyway. Plus, why America is the AI factory that won't drive its own car, and the desert island he'd strand himself on with 5 executives and 0 relatives.
Welcome to the ADOTAT Show. My guest today is Dennis Pekel, a 20-year-old Dutch Adtech veteran who just spent a decade inside the engine room of JustPremium and GumGum journey, leading 68 people across 4 continents and through 2 major acquisitions. Dennis thinks that the U.S. Adtech industry is having its Detroit moment and building the biggest AI factories while the rest of the world learns to drive someone else's car. He has a framework called the Alienation tax, which is the cost brands pay when they treat the global market as a translation project. And his superpower wish is to see through other people's eyes. Dennis, welcome. Let's find out what the view looks like. First question of the day is always, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. We have had a lovely day here in Europe, in Amsterdam.
Dennis, you coined a term, the alienation tax. That is the cost brands pay when they fail to respect the culture and perspective of their audience. That's an awesome concept. But tax implies a number, implies you can calculate it, can you? So what does the alienation tax cost in CPMs, in wasted spend, and lost lifetime value? Because if you cannot put a number on it, it's just philosophy. And philosophies, as we know, don't get budgets.
Philosophies don't get budgets. I get that. Thank you for asking this question. Let me go one step back to explain to you where the alienation tax comes from. I think in current society, we have a crisis of truth.
Right.
People don't have similar views on the world. They don't have similar facts. So we are speaking about a very disjointed society with people having their own views on what's true or not true. I've witnessed the conversation of former colleagues, educated, very educated people, and they couldn't agree. They couldn't agree because they used other facts to substantiate their opinions. And I asked them afterwards, because I was curious, which media they were consuming. And they were watching different TV shows, different radio stations they listened into, different websites, different podcasts, etc. So that's the first step. And as a brand, you need to deal with that fractured reality that's kind of enforced even more by the big social platforms, because you're more confronted with the opinions you already have than opinions from people that have opposite views. So if the worldview of the consumer doesn't align with the worldview of the brand or the message, there is an alienation happening between the brand and the consumer. So this is a little bit explanation of the high level thinking about it. Then we go to your question. Can you put numbers on it?
Right.
First, we have seen some outliers of this happening. For example, Google at the Olympics in France, they pushed an AI ad into the Olympics, which is a very human, competitive, traditional environment. They needed to pull back their budget. There was a PR crisis. Something similar happened to Swatch. Watch brand made a mistake in Asia.
I had one of them. I had a Swatch when I was a teen. They were huge here.
They were huge almost everywhere. They made also a mistake. They needed to pull their budgets. They needed to deal with the PR backlash. And apparently, supposedly also their stock went 4% down. This is things that actually happened in real life that were very visible. And this is happening on a smaller scale as well. Now we go to the numbers. The numbers are wasted ad spend, but also potentially loss of brand equity, losing potential clients as well. It's hard to calculate all of it, but let me do a bit of math together with you. I think the global ad spend almost $850 billion.
Right.
Roughly. Different sources, whatever. That's more or less the current spend. Only 10% approximately of those dollars are going to news or political environments or highly opinionated areas. And the attention is higher, but it's kind of underutilized. So 10% of the 850 is
it's a lot of money.
5,000. It's a lot of money.
It's a very large company. So I
Of
want to
course,
talk about, you have
yes.
something called the worldview framework,
Yeah.
right? That you want to become a bidding signal for programmatic and agentic advertising. It's obviously very ambitious. You're saying that cultural understanding should be a data signal that affects how you bid, not just how you write copy?
Yeah. So I think, of course, the copy is created with a certain perspective. Let's go one step back into the framework a little bit first, and then we will dive into the mechanics a little bit more. I think there are a few defining scales. So on one hand, you have the people with a conservative mindset and a progressive mindset. And you have people with high trust in institutions and with low trust in institutions. So it creates a framework with 4 quadrants, and all those quadrants, those 4 quadrants represent a specific group.
I find the trust part very interesting, because you said that in this world, unified truth has disappeared, and that truth is the only currency that matters. That's extremely profound.
But do you agree or not?
Well, yeah, it's obviously a political observation disguised as a marketing insight.
True.
Also,
but I think part of what drives people apart is their lens on society, their lens on politics. Especially these days, it's very present. I think also in the US, if I watch the news, but also in the Netherlands and other parts of Europe and the world. I think it's a big topic, and So it is profound. That I agree with you, but I think it's needed. If you look at the tech environment, I think there was a FTC ruling recently where some agencies tried to block certain news environments on default.
Right.
And those holdco companies came to a settlement. It proves that there is an issue there. And I think the industry needs, you could call it a GDPR system to route the right message to the right audience. And that based on their profound lens, worldviews on the world.
Right. So how does advertising navigate the fact there is no shared reality?
So I think how we can navigate it and improve the situation and improve the utilization of news and opinionated areas on the web, podcast, etc. Because potentially it can be used in different media, on different media types, is to really label very clearly the sentiments based on this worldview framework. What's the content about? What are the trends about? What are the comments about? To create clear labels on worldviews and match that with the worldviews of a brand or narrative, just being part of the OpenRTB protocol as a custom signal, custom field.
So you also...
If last touch attribution worked, your waiter would get full credit for the meal. We make sure the chef gets credit too. Incremental.
Mention, I thought this was interesting, and I think it's relevant, that your Yoda is Erin Mayer, the author of The Culture Man.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, she teaches how different cultures communicate, lead, and make business decisions. But you added something to this. Hotel hospitality taught you how to run the business. I know a little about hotels. The front desk is a handshake, and the real business is the invisible part. It's always the back, kitchen prep, cleaning, the back of the house. The invisible part is broken. The guest will never come back. Did you see that inside of companies you worked for? Was the back of the house the thing that nobody talked about?
I'm not sure if nobody talked about it, because obviously when I was present in conversations, whether it was with vendors or in the companies I worked for, I always addressed this part, because I truly believe that value creation for your clients, but also efficiency, largely comes from the back of the house. Of course, you need the sellers to sell according to your strengths and your capabilities, which is very important. But after the intake phase is the back of the house that makes a huge difference. If you compare it with a hotel, if the bedroom is not clean, you can be very nice at the front desk, but it's very unlikely that people will come back, and even worse, potentially will get a negative recommendation on the web as well.
So you're a Dutchman who built an industry measurement standards, ran European operations for a U.S. acquired company, and served as the DPO during the GDPR implement. You've been on both sides of the Atlantic. Which side understands less? Does the United States underestimate Europe, or maybe Europe underestimates the United States?
It's not the way that I look at it, because that would be quite judgmental. It's more that I want to learn from both sides, but both have their strengths and they're vastly different. So if you look at the US, at least from my worldview perspective and experience, the US is about high velocity, high risk, high rewards, very much focused on profit. If you look at Europe, it's way more a guided, I think a guided collective it's more about guided collective responsibility. So the government and the institutions are way more involved in protecting collective interest and balancing them out. So I think what Europe can learn from the US is, of course, the velocity and being more bold and go all in. And what the US potentially can learn from Europe is to be a little bit more mindful and take into account the perspectives and the interest of different stakeholders.
So as the world framework as a bidding signal, in 3 months you said success means the framework comes to life. This sounds a lot like you're building a company or a product or maybe a consulting practice.
Yeah.
What's the plan here?
Well, what's the plan here? Listen, I like just for background information. I loved GumGum end of last year. Right. After 11 years journey at JustPremium and GumGum. So I'm totally independent at the moment, and it gives me time to think.
You're just in the idea stage?
I'm in the idea stage. It gives me the opportunity to have honest, transparent conversations without an agenda. And I would really like to build out this framework together with industry partners and bring it to life.
So also found it interesting. You said, and I think this is the most interesting part, your responses, I have to be honest, was the best responses for any questionnaire we got. You built frameworks, and then you talked about the Detroit moment for Adtech. You said that the U.S. is repeating the fatal mistakes of the 1970s auto industry, dominant in scale, arrogant, building for themselves, assuming the world wanted to drive the same exact models. And you're now applying that to AI. The U.S. is the world's first AI factory, pouring billions into infrastructure, but your other countries are adopting AI at double the rate. The U.S. builds engine, everyone else builds for local relevance. This is genuinely the most provocative argument I have heard on this show. Can you walk me why you think the U.S. is about to get disruptive in its own industry?
Obviously, as you call it out, I want to provoke a little bit.
Right.
That's what I learned along the years, that it's okay to provoke once in a while. I think what the US is doing and accomplishing with AI is amazing. But if you look at adoption rate, applications, I think what's happening in countries like India, it goes at double the rate because there is a lot of technical engineering skills, young and very talented people, well educated. I think that they have their positions to be really successful there. Also, UAE is very focused on the AI. A country as the Netherlands that adopted, for example, programmatic quite early stage with trading desks. I think we have the benefits potentially being a small country where things are quite well organized. So we might have the benefit there. So I just want to challenge US companies to take more into account the perspectives and the cultural sensitivities of other regions, because I think it will make them even more successful. And that's, of course, what went wrong with the auto industry. And that's why I took it as an example.
You said also the U.S. is the AI factory, but not the super user. Other countries adopted double the rate, as I mentioned. Which countries? Is it India, China, the Nordics, Southeast Asia?
It's definitely India.
Pretty much those?
India is using it at adopting a rapid scale, but also the Emirates and areas like that, they're also adopting at rapid scale. They have a lot of focus there, and I think the US, from my perspective, is the world one economy.
Well, I just did a report yesterday where the actual adoption rate, people were around 80 to 90% were saying they were going to adopt it, less than 10%. I put down 8% actually adopted in the United States.
Yeah, so the adoption rate at the moment is low. It's also something the McKinsey reported quite recently.
Right.
And of course...
And then then the real AI adoption rate is almost nothing. A lot of this is just machine learning and programs, just normal... And they're putting AI ending on it.
So, and at the end, practice makes perfect. So the people starting to use it quicker, they will probably be instrumental to, let's say, improve the system as well. And that's one thing. Secondly, I do think that has a very strong first mover advantage, access to capital. But as time goes on, it will be probably, I want to say easy, but probably not easy, very, very possible to also build models way cheaper. And then the capital doesn't matter that much anymore. And your competitive advantage will reduce.
So you mentioned agentic advertising multiple times. Obviously, Brian O'Kelly, the godfather or the grandfather, whatever you want to call him, of programmatic, is now trying to build the app nexus of agentic. What does your worldview framework look like in an agentic advertising world? Because if AI agents are making things on their own, culture context is even more critical or completely irrelevant, depending on how the agents are trained.
I agree. So first of all, Brian O'Kelly visited Amsterdam, I think 1 week and a half ago to
Yes, I saw the
industry.
The photos. Talk to him about it.
Yeah, and I visited his. I went to that meeting. I was very impressed and inspired by the by this get together. I think it's to be honest, it all depends on how humans choose to apply it.
Right.
In an age-to-agent world, you could say it's totally irrelevant, but at the end of the day, still there is outreach to consumers. And there it will remain, from my perspective, relevant. The only question is, how will you train and educate the AI to deal with it? At some point, humans are involved. And that's the whole purpose of advertising. It's mass communication, right? Reaching people at scale. And the agents probably will help to do that, target it, so more precision, or will do it more efficient. That's one part of the equation that we see happening here. We see a lot of Adtech companies applying AI on top of their current systems for the exact same that I called out efficiency or increased precision or combination of both. The real question, of course, is there a way to totally redo the plumbing of the industry? The way media is transacted between supply and demand, which is now partly or almost fully owned by the DSPs and the SSPs. Can you create a new reality? And I think Brian O'Kelly with HCP, that's the direction he's heading.
So the Netherlands is an interesting story. There are only 18 million people, yet they're the largest foreign investor, largest EU investor in the United States. It was an early adopter of programmatic, as you mentioned, and you chair the committee that built the first Dutch online audience measurement standards. How does a country of 18 million punch so far above its weight in ad tech? And what can the US learn from the Dutch model?
I think the Netherlands is not only punching above its weight in ad tech, but in multiple industries.
Right.
My own I think one of the things that is very helpful that the Netherlands is a relatively small country. So yes, you need a lot of alignment with stakeholders, but if everybody is aligned, which is not the huge amount of people, you can also move very fast. So it takes a little bit more preparation, but in the execution phase, it can go faster to scale. I think that's one part. The other part, the reason that the Netherlands and the Dutch economy is so successful is because we have such a small home market that we always need to interact with other countries. We do business by nature with other countries, aligning with what they need, aligning with their cultures, and try to be successful abroad. And I think many US companies, they have such a US local market that their first focus is fully on their local market and that they can already scale enormously.
So you spent 10 years at JustPremium and then GumGum, 2 acquisitions, 68 people. You use the phrase engine room. There's a deliberate metaphor. The engine room is where the heat is, where the work happens, and nobody from the bridge ever visits. Did the engine room teach you that the executives on the bridge? What did the engine room teach you that the executives on the bridge never understood?
It's a good question. I think I want to generalize a little bit and move away from only my experience.
Right.
I think sometimes the engine room can be heated,
Of course.
can be dirty as well. So you need to roll up your sleeve and be willing to put in the hours to keep it clean, and try to find a schedule and schedule's maybe the wrong word, to find a mechanism where everybody in the engine room can trust upon each other, because all those small raiders are interdependent. So there's not one part of the engine room. If one part is broke, kind of the whole engine stops. And I think from an XF perspective, it's very hard to understand all the bits and pieces in the engine room. And potentially it also doesn't matter for your success too much from a exec perspective.
Right.
It's not necessarily that I agree, by the way. I think it matters a lot. I think it's difference between a very satisfied returning client and therefore able to scale up your business. But I can imagine from exec perspective, you are more busy with getting your finances sorted, getting additional investments, etc.
So I also noticed you improved retail rates from as low as 60 to as high as close to 90% on a book of business worth about 100 million euros. That's a massive improvement. What was broken? What did you fix? And be specific. I don't want optimized service tiers and proactive ownership. That's the LinkedIn version. I want the ADOTAT version.
Want the ADOTAT version? I think what definitely helps is my Dutch mindset. And my Dutch mindset is very direct and very focused on what's wrong. I'm never satisfied. So I don't see the bright side. I see the dark side and the things that need to be fixed. And I think still there is no silver bullet. But one thing you fix all that's the ADOTAT truth. And the other truth from my perspective is that one of the critical points of renewal is the first step. And the first step is a good sale. So you need to sell according to your capabilities. And there are some sellers that are under pressure. They want to achieve their goals and they start not to sell your capabilities or your solutions. They try to sell what the client potentially wants to buy. And so they are over-promising and therefore you will always under-deliver. And what I find out, basically, that approximately 80% of the cases that are challenging are caused only by 20% of the client patches. So you can, instead of educating everybody, fixing a whole process, we went out with very targeted education to the seller involved in those patches, because that's a way better approach than a very much more focused approach of your energy than trying to educate everybody. Another meeting, another training. If you see that the problem is only caused by a minority.
Now we're going to move on to 5 executives from 5 continents walk onto a beach. We're going to strand you on a desert island. Interesting. You brought people from the industry, which strangely enough doesn't happen a lot. You brought Harry Cardman from Cargo, representing America and the Buffett-style scaling. Eric Visser from JustPremium, representing the Dutch directness and European entrepreneurship. Hitesh Chawla from Silverpush, representing Indians engineering power, and Jorge Payatos from CTAG, representing your European to LATAM leap. And of course, Brian O'Kelly, the godfather of Adtech, who you said is also your favorite barbecue chef. You didn't bring a survivalist. You didn't bring your family. You brought your thesis.
I brought my thesis, first of all, for sure, because people represent all different geographical areas of the globe. So that they all have a very entrepreneurial mindset.
Right. Harry Cardman did Cargo. He built that in 2003, I want to say. He's a mobile advertising pioneer. He's still independent. In an industry of exits and acquisition, Cardman built probably the most sustainable businesses in our industry. Is that what you meant by Buffett-style long-term value over quick exits?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I meant. I had the opportunity to sit down with Harry by the end of last year in London, and I found
he's basically the anti-Detroit.
He is the anti-Detroit. He's so modest, I would say, really curious and interested. And I do think he does represent cultural sensitivity to a big extent, which fascinated me. Indeed, he built a sustainable business with a long-term view. He's his own boss. He doesn't need to have quick capital gains. That helps him to build a very sustainable business.
So Hitesh Chawla from Silverpush, you said he represents the incredible engineering power and adaptability of the East. And you added the global core is shifting. That is the Detroit moment in human form. Is India the company that will re-engineer U.S. Adtech for local markets at a fraction of the cost?
That's what I expect. I think the benefit from India over a country as China is that India is way more connected. The level of English in general is higher. They're obviously.
Do you think that the U.S. knows how much engineering talent is building competing products, or we just still think they're a place to outsource some talent?
I'm pretty sure it's still a place to outsource.
Right.
And I think that for sure they're still outsourcing to India. And it depends a little bit on what media do you read. How much are you interested in other markets? I think the people that are very aware of what's happening on the global scale, they are very much aware that India is moving at lightning speed.
Right.
And we have seen something similar before, right? With Apple. Apple phones originally were fabricated in China until China really got the way how to create phones, and now there are Chinese brands that also are competing with Apple.
I was just looking at one of the Chinese cars that are not allowed in the United States. It was amazing. It didn't even look like next generation. It looked like 2 generations ahead of us.
I think even the CEO
a movie
of Ford,
theater in the car.
I think even the current CEO of Ford is calling out the amazing cars coming from Asia.
Right. So Jorge Payatos, he's from SeedTag, and I thought it interesting. You called him a peer in the European fortress mindset. That phrase implies that Europe is defending something, not attacking. What does that mean?
I think Europe is defending to a certain extent that their unique values. If you look at lawsuits here in Europe, it's very often Google, Apple, Microsoft, the big tech firms, they are under pressure. And I think Europe is defending its privacy first thinking, its collaborative responsibility. So you're right to call out that I think that Europe tried to defend their unique values against the Magnificent Seven, basically.
I find the Brian O'Kelly answer the most interesting because he did so many things. Obviously, the godfather of Adtech, he invented the ad exchange, real-time bidding. He's now inventing agentic advertising. You said he understands the plumbing, but you had the most human thing I've ever heard. You like him as a barbecue chef. So here's the important question. What does Brian O'Kelly's barbecue taste like?
That's a very good question. I think it will be very diverse. I think it will have definitely some very spicy spicy meat and some great vegetables.
Right.
From my
you haven't eaten his barbecue yet, though.
No, I haven't eaten his barbecue.
This is aspirational.
It's aspirational, definitely. And I think part of being on a desert island is to stay alive. You need the food. So the barbecue chef is very important in that matter to keep everybody healthy and well.
Barbacoa style, the original barbecue. You bury it.
Yeah, fair.
So you brought 0 family members, 0 non-industry people. Your desert island is a working vacation with 5 tech executives. When the work stops, the industry stops, and the framework stops, who are you? Because right now you're just a thesis. Is there a version of you outside of Adtech?
I'm to be honest, I have always been very passionate about my work.
Right.
So, is there a version for me outside my work? I think the version outside work is just a father of 3, being an unpaid Uber driver to bring my kids to parties and to school. And the other element that's very important. I'm a Dutch Jew, which also determines my being, my thinking.
Right.
My way of interacting. And I do think...
You said you didn't want to talk about it a lot. I want to push on that a little bit. The Just Dutch Jewish community, and I know a little bit about it, has a very specific history. The concepts of diaspora, cultural preservation, understanding what it needs to be a minority in someone else's country, it feels deeply connected to what you call the alienation tax and worldview framework. Is there actually a connection between your personal identity and your professional thesis?
Yeah, I think so. I think... From historic perspective and my own point of view, it's very important to be really aware of your environment, their point of views, what's important to them, not only from the perspective of interacting, but also for self-preservation. Does it get dangerous? Yes or no?
Right.
So I think to your point, my creating this framework definitely has to do with let's say, my personal background as well.
So 20 years in Dutch ad tech, you founded ad networks, built measurement standards, served as a DPO, and spent a decade in U.S. acquisitions. So what makes the Dutch ad tech scene different from every other market?
I think I'm not sure different from every other market, but the strength of the Dutch Adtech scene is definitely that the market is relatively small. So if you are connected, you have quite good access to key players. That's one. And the second thing is there are a lot of international buying hubs here in the Netherlands from international companies as well. So that makes it quite international environment. And London is only 1 hour flight away. Paris is only 1 hour away. So it's both by mentality and geographic positioning, it's really well connected. And that has to do with the local market size as well, being so small.
You also said you don't do politics, you do clarity, trust, and predictable outcomes. I build the systems that find the answers. It's obviously your operating philosophy. You also just described a world where trust is fragmented, where truth's relative, and where cultural misunderstanding is a tax on every transaction. How does a person who does not do politics navigate a world that's, well, completely political?
I think, Pesach, I'm just very human, so that there is some discrepancy there. I fully admit it. I'm curious about people, and curious about society, and I think you cannot be curious about society and people by not being curious about politics as well, because it's very influential. That doesn't mean necessarily that I am into politics in a corporate or business environment. The Dutch mindset is very direct, and politics in general requires a little bit more of a smooth navigation of sentiments, and let's keep it at the sentiments. I was looking for another word, but it doesn't pop up.
So rapid fire, whatever comes to your mind. One word to describe the US ad tech industry.
Scale.
One word to describe the European ad tech industry.
Regulation.
The best thing about working for an American company as a Dutchman.
I need to be rapid. Sell the story. Be bold.
The worst thing.
The worst thing is I always found the lack of nuance a little bit difficult. And I also found it difficult that some people viewed Europe as one, while Europe is not necessarily one.
What would you call the company?
That's a good question. I didn't give it any thought yet. Do you have a good recommendation?
Worldview?
Worldview, if that's a little bit, if that stands out, I will call it
maybe
worldview
like
analytics.
Veritat or Veritas. One sentence you want the audience to remember before we go.
Yeah, please work with me, because I'm not sure if it culturally resonates. One of the sentences that I really liked from a former colleague that said, in a world where nobody is the same, how can you be different? And I really like that phrasing because it makes everybody equal.
So before we go, I want to say one thing. Anyone who brings 5 ad tech executives from 5 continents to a desert island, including Brian O'Kelly as a barbecue chef, is either building the future of advertising or planning the most ambitious dinner party in history. Either way, I want an invitation.
You are very welcome.
And that is the show. Dennis Pekel, no company, no product, no invoice for the tax he named, and still more true things in an hour than most people manage with a Series B behind them. The ADOTAT Show is brought to you by Troutman Amin LLP, the firm that reads the regulation before it ruins your quarter, and by incremental.com, because this whole episode was about the holdout test, and incrementality is the holdout test with its shoes on. If your vendor cannot show you the lift, they can. Next week, Ashkan Karbas-Frushan of Watch Mojo, who built an empire out of the lists everyone thought were beneath them. You will want to be here. Until then, stay bold, stay curious, and know more than you did yesterday.